Check 1, 2. Good evening. Welcome to the Dominance Academy. I'm your host, Mr. Justin. And today we've got a bit of an educational show set up for you about correction and punishment, with a little added bonus about realignment. So that's what we're going to get into, because a lot of this is misunderstood. Correction, punishment, and realignment. So we're going to define what each of these are, what they're intended for, when to use them, why you would use them, because it's all very important. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because it's an essential part of leadership, because the people that we're dealing with are not robots. You don't just plug in the programming and the woman is going to be the same from that day forward. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't. There's life. There's problems that happen. There's unexpected things that arise. There's internal issues, traumas that come up, old habits, beliefs, forgetfulness, all sorts of stuff that cause the individual to veer off course. And it's also a test to you as a dominant to keep yourself in alignment. Because the truth is that if you've got a devoted submissive, you're going to find them special. They're going to be devoted to you in such a way that it's going to be hard not to care to some degree. And if you're not a sociopath, you're going to have some kind of feelings about this person after they've spent enough time proving the consistency of their devotion. And so what can happen is you might get a little soft. You might get a little softer on the edges and not keep things in alignment, or be afraid to keep things in alignment. And so when things happen, and they will, it's up to you as the leader, as the setter of the stage, as the guide, as the main influence, the pivot point for the dynamic itself, to maintain that structure within yourself first, and then for the dynamic as a whole. So we're going to look at correction, punishment, and realignment. They're somewhat similar, but they are distinctly different to be used in certain situations. So, welcome to the inner chamber. Tonight, we do not speak to the surface. We're going beneath it, to the quiet engine of obedience, the pulse of devotion, the architecture of discipline. There's a difference between punishment and correction, a difference most overlook. But in a power exchange, where a single word can open a wound, where silence can be sanctuary or exile, that difference is everything. Correction is the soft hands that keeps the soul aligned. Punishment is the sharp edge that protects the boundary. Both are tools, but are truths. Both of them are truths. But the hand that wields them must be wise, not reactive, intentional, not impulsive. So ask yourself, are you shaping your submissive, or are you merely reacting to her behavior? That is the most important question to ask yourself before you do anything. If she breaks a rule, if she starts veering off course, if there's something that arises in her that is clearly not part of the program, how you interact, what is the prime motivation? Is it to keep her in shape, Or are you just reacting? So tonight we're going to draw the line between these two paths and teach you how to walk on them. So, what's the difference between correction and punishment? Why does it matter to know the difference between them in a power dynamic? And this really isn't about vocabulary. It's about the emotional fabric of a Dom-Sub bond. So let's look at the definitions. Punishment is often a direct response to disobedience or a violation of rules. Hey, Alka Guns, thanks for posting that link. I appreciate it. So, punishment is often a direct response to disobedience or a violation of the rules. It carries emotional weight, disappointment, sometimes anger, or a deliberate power display. It's meant to remind the submissive of consequences, to reinforce authority, and to press into their psyche that their actions have meaning. Punishment can be sharp, isolating, even ceremonious. It says, you knew, and you crossed the line. Correction, on the other hand, is more intimate. It's instructional. It's guidance. A redirection of behavior is used when the submissive acts from ignorance, impulse, or misunderstanding, sometimes even forgetfulness. It's not about making them feel bad. It's about aligning them and shaping them. Correction, on the other hand, correction is the hands on the chin, not the cane across her thighs. It says, I see you veering off course. Come back to me. Remember who you are. And this is the huge difference between the two. This is what's really important. It's that intention behind it. So, in short, punishment wounds to remind, correction touches to refine. I think I can let this calm the fuck down. Okay. All right, so examples, right? She breaks protocol. She enters the room without kneeling. These are just examples, right? She enters the room without kneeling. Her eyes flick towards you, uncertain, a flicker of rebellion or forgetfulness. It's not clear. You say nothing at first. Later, when she's stripped and waiting by the bed, you say, little one, you forgot to kneel today. Immediately, there's recognition of what she's done. Her eyes lower. And you say, you were not being defiant, you were careless. But carelessness is the seed of disobedience. So we're going to correct that before it grows. And you guide her gently to her knees, one hand on the nape of her neck, the other under her chin. You make her hold the position. Stillness, breathing, remembrance. Kneel until the habit returns to your bones. And you could have her just sit there for as long as you choose. This is correction. Cool, focused, recalibrating. But let the day come when she knows the rule, feels the bond, hears your voice in her head, and she still disobeys. Then it changes. So this is where punishment comes in, where they know the boundary, they know the rule, they know the expectation, and then they do otherwise by choice. You command her forward, voice low, carved from stone. You chose to ignore what you know pleases me. That's not forgetfulness, that's defiance. She feels the distance between you, right? So just in your energy alone, there's coldness to it. The correction felt more like guidance, right? You're holding her and gently guiding her towards where she needs to be. The punishment is cold. The energy is cold. It's more firm. It is not vibrant at all. And that comes off in your body language. It comes off in the tone of your voice, the vibe coming out of your eyes. Whether she's allowed to look at you at all. You say, look at the floor. You chose to ignore what you know pleases me. That is not forgetfulness, that's defiance. And she'll feel the distance between you two. That terrible ache of displeasure. She is bound, bent over, you strike, not for play, not for arousal, but to imprint consequence. And then you can say, you do not decide the shape of our bond. I do. And then each stroke, be it, say it was through a hand or a cane or a flogger or something like that, you do not decide the shape of our bond. I do. And each stroke marks not just flesh, but the psychic boundaries of obedience. So understand that correction realigns her behavior. Punishment reminds her who she belongs to. So correction is the guiding, instructive acts that's rooted in care and aimed at behavioral alignment. The punishment is a response to disobedience, failure, or defiance, often with emotional or disciplinary weight. Correction affirms belonging. Punishment reminds her of boundaries. So the tone, the feel, right? Correction is like warm steel. Punishment is like a cold flame. And I know that doesn't make sense, right? It would have made more sense if I said cold steel and warm flame, but that's not what it is, right? Because punishment is cold, but it burns, right? Correction is warm, but it's firm. So there's the difference between those two things. On the nature of correction, correction is the quiet hand on her back. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. It says, I see where you've drifted. Come on back. Correction is not about fault. It's about calibration. It's the dominant saying, you belong to a standard, mine, and I will not let you forget. So when it comes to either of these things, right, is intention and your energy. So you have to pay attention to what you're feeling and what your intention is when correcting or punishing. And I know I mentioned anger, but you don't want the anger to be fueling what you do. Like if you're angry about something, you can recognize that you're angry. But if you get the sensation that this is fueling your behavior, like say if it's going towards a punishment, you're going to want to take a moment. 5 minutes, you could just tell her to wait 5 minutes while you go take a walk, while you go get some water or whatever. Or you could put it off for a half an hour. It doesn't matter really. But you want to be able to calibrate and gauge those emotions because it's important that you have the right emotional state, the right clarity of mind, and the right intention. Okay? Very important. For correction, it's about your presence, your patience, and the mentality of long-term training. So the idea is that correction has the long vision in mind. It's about the entire program as itself as it extends into the future. It's not about just that moment. It's like what that moment represents as it's connected to everything else. Punishment is much more localized. It's the immediate consequence, sovereignty, and consequence enforcement. So it's about nipping something in the bud. And it's not about the larger picture. It's about that moment right then and there. So this is kind of, I hope, giving you an idea of like how to understand and approach correction and punishment. Correction is broader and longer. Punishment is shorter and not so deep. I mean, it can run very deep, but it's not philosophical, right? It's not trying to get at the core of her behaviors and mindset and things of that nature. It's very immediate. So on punishment is thunder. It comes not because the sky is angry, but because something sacred was violated. And in that storm, The submissive feels the edge of consequence, not because she is unloved, but because she is owned. And ownership has rules, gravity. And when gravity is defied, impact follows. So what does this stuff do to her? What does this stuff do to the submissive? And so this is important too. And one of my guys, I'm very proud of him. He's just now waking up to the fact that he is incredibly influential in his relationship. He realizes that his emotional state sends ripples. Basically, everything that he is like dropping a pebble in a pond. And each area of him is a separate pebble. So his emotional state, that's one pebble that has ripples. His mental state, how he thinks, the words he uses, the tone in which he uses them. Now, at this point in the game, he's overly aware, and that's just part of it. When you start coming into my neighborhood, you become overly aware of how everything that you say, think, feel, and do has impact, or at least the potential for impact. And whether it's good impact or bad impact, it's still impact. And so what happens is the awareness grows and you become, I wouldn't say fixated, but your awareness becomes very sharp about all of these little factors. But over time, after you refine it and this becomes habit, you no longer become so hyper aware of these things. So don't think that you're just going to be this crazy person who's fixated on all these different fields within yourself. That's not the case. After a while, it becomes automatic and you don't consciously think about these things. But that's after refining your minds, refining your emotions, refining your behavior and your speech. So as this relates to correction, right, is that what this does is it builds security. That's the whole point. It builds security and reinforces the structure. So that's all you're doing really, is you're saying, look, here's the pathway. You're veered off course and you're kind of drifting this way and I'm bringing my hands back this way and edging you back on course and showing you this is where you belong. This is where things are supposed to be. And when it comes to correction, you don't want to wait too long. Well, with punishment, you don't want to wait too long either. But it's important that you don't wait, because the longer you wait, the less impact it will have. And the harder it will be to put things back on course if they continue to veer off course. Say habits develop. So let's say, going back to that example of like walking into the room and kneeling. If you let that slide and then you don't bring it up, you don't correct it. And then the next day it happens again. And the next day and the next day and the next day. Now there's been 15 events of the ritual of kneeling when entering the room. Let's say the bedroom. Now that has become a new habit. And you no longer are enforcing it. So you've set a new precedent that has broken the law of the precedent that you had set back when that rule was created and agreed upon. So now this is not only affecting your mind, it's affecting her mind and the entire dynamic as it is. Now, if you say, oh shit, I completely forgot about that stuff, I want to bring it back. Now you have to work extra hard because you let it slide for so long that now you're going to have to do double effort to put things back into place. And she might not have the full trust in you to do this because you forgot. you drop the ball. And that might just turn into needing a very frank conversation, owning up to your forgetfulness, knowing that you're not a robot, not making excuses or anything, just owning the problem and saying that you would like it to be corrected. You'd like things to get back on course. You understand the benefits. She understands the benefits. And then from that point on, you have to be really on point, because now she's watching you to see if you're going to forget again, because her trust has been dented just a little bit. Maybe not even a dent, a scratch, but that's enough. That's certainly enough. This is why me and a lot of the fellas, we talk about the importance of consistency. It's really, really important. So just know that when you're creating rules, don't be overzealous and bite off more than you can chew, or take on more than you're willing to manage or have the capacity to manage. All right? Start small. Just a couple of things, because you don't want to forget. That's going to make you look like a fucking retard. And that ruins the trust. That ruins her ability to look up at you, to admire you, if you're forgetting your own rules. So don't do it. Only take on what you know you can manage. And if you don't know, just take on a little bit at a time. So what's happening inside her when you correct her is that it builds security and reinforces that structure, because it's a reminder. It's a reminder of the structure, reminder of who she is to you, and her place within that structure. Punishment, on the other hand, it creates intensity. It has strong psychological impact, sometimes fear or catharsis. And it's an immediate thing. It's like a thunderbolt, right? The Buddhists, they talk about the thunderbolt. They don't separate thunder and lightning. The Buddhists, they consider it just one thing, and they use the thunderbolt a lot in their mythology and their symbolism. And it's the thing that brings about enlightenment. You know, you see like deities and they're holding this thing. It's got, like, you've probably seen sculptures of it, like brass sculptures, and it's this bulbous thing in the middle, and then on the outside are these like kind of heart-shaped things that are wide, and then they taper to points, and there's like many of them, you know. And sometimes you'll see a deity or something like that holding it, right? And this is the thunderbolt that shatters ignorance and brings about instantaneous enlightenments that the Japanese would call satori. That's kind of what punishment does. It's supposed to be something that shocks the system. It shocks the emotions. It rattles wherever they are, and gets their eyes to open. And it's not always going to be something that's physically painful, because what if you're dealing with a high-level masochist, right? Like you bring out like a steel chain to like strike her ass with, and she's like, okay, like that feels fantastic. Give me more, right? So in order to punish effectively, you need to know what their actual pain points are. What actually causes a severe enough emotional response that it gets their attention. This is what's important. It's not about how strongly you enforce this punishment, or you enact this punishment. It's not about force. It's about strategy. You can have the gentlest touch, or it could be just some phrase. It could be a subtle movement. But if it touches on something that is very tender to her, it will send the same message as someone who's not a masochist getting whacked across the ass with a cane. So you have to be very understanding of your submissive and what moves them. not only for punishment, but also for correction. Because knowing what emotions recenter them, what gets them to kind of reflect inward and come to that state of bringing their awareness back on themselves and helping them understand that their thoughts, words, and actions have impact, that they have meaning. That's what's important about the correction. So whenever you do these things, it's important to get things back to center. All right. Now, in scenes, it's known otherwise as aftercare. And I guess this would fall under the umbrella of aftercare, because the whole point of aftercare is to basically recenter things and say, hey, everything's okay. Right? The scene is done, the punishment is done, the correction is over, everything's right in the world. And so after you do, I think especially a punishment, because they can be very emotionally charged, no matter what it is, whether if it's something verbal or something psychological, emotional, or physical, it's typically has a strong emotional charge within her, even though potentially what you've done was very subtle or overt. It doesn't really matter. But it's her reaction and her response that's typically going to be very strong. And you don't want her to just sit in that, right? Just like if, say, you've got a kid and he studied or he didn't study and he fails the geography exam. And so you're upset and you decide to punish the kid for failing the geography exam. You're not, after the punishment is done, you're not going to just let the kid sit in sorrow and shame. And then just say, all right, no, I'm going to go do this thing over here. Get yourself ready for bed. It's like it's too cold. It's too distant. You don't just leave them in the mire. You have to say, all right, it's done. I've made my point. You understand. And now let's shift this. Let's not let you continue feeling this, because you don't want to be just left with this lingering feeling of disapproval that you then have to kind of let rest on your own. You have to remind them, bring them back to center and say, hey, despite that, despite the failure, I still love you. You're still my kid. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I do care. And what matters to me most is you, is your well-being, your mental strength, my love for you, me wanting to take the best for you. So in the same sense, when, say, punishing your submissive, you don't leave them in the dirt to just, writhe on the ground and cry or whatever, Bring them out. Tell them it's okay. Tell them that what's done is done. That the issue's been taken care of and everything is right in the world. Go eat some fruit. Go get some ice cream, right? Give her a bath, whatever it is that will recenter her. All right. And you should know your submissive of what those recentering things are. All right. It kind of, even though I think that stuff is kind of bullshit, the whole love language thing, it's kind of like that. Like some things just resonate better. Some girl is gonna want to snuggle with like a super soft blanket, like some microfiber thing. I actually keep a pelt, like a rabbit skin pelt, and the fur on it is so incredibly soft. It's a huge piece. I don't know how big that fucking rabbit was, but it's pretty damn big. And so when I need to do like some physical soothing, I use that. And I've seen people have like gloves. They have like a rabbit skin glove. It's not really a glove because there's no fingers, so it's more like a mitt, sort of like an oven mitt, but without the thumb even. And it's all made of rabbit skin. And they use that and they just kind of stroke the girl's body as like a means of settling her down. So just know that after you punish, It's really important to bring her back to center, bring her back down to earth, let her know she's loved, she's cherished, cared for, everything's okay. So, a little bit on misusing correction. When a dominant corrects too often, too softly, too quickly, he starts to sound like a worried parent, not a sovereign presence. Correction should never dip. It should strike clean, clear, and needed. If she doesn't feel the edge in your guidance, it's not correction, it's management. And you don't want to be a manager, right? You should know how to manage, but you don't want to be pushed into the role of being a manager because of your inability to correct properly. And because if you're correcting properly, then the things would not be recurring. Because if they're recurring, then you just turn into a manager. And so you basically turned yourself into a manager because of an inability to correct properly. So this is something to pay attention to. It doesn't mean a failure. Just forget about that. It's not like you failed if something's recurring. It just is an opportunity for you to say, okay, I need to step back and analyze how I'm going about this correction, because I'm not getting through to her. And a lot of people will blame the girl, saying, oh, she's stupid, she's not paying attention, she doesn't respect me, blah, 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 all this stuff about her. But really, it should be looking at the source first, which is you. You are the thing that the dynamic pivots around. You are the central pivot point. So if anything goes awry, you are not necessarily always the cause, but you are the first place to look. Always. Always examine yourself first. Then, after that's been analyzed, and if everything looks tight, clean, buttoned up, then you look to the other. But always look to yourself first. You don't want to correct too often, too soft, too quick. You don't want to sound like a helicopter parent. That's going to be the worst. And like I said, you're just going to be managing shit, constantly putting out fires. And that's going to add stress to everybody. So, like a mild behavioral slip, right? This happens to me all the time, okay? And the thing is that when it comes to, like, say if you've got more than one submissive, or you've got one submissive who's learning different things, there's going to be a slip up within each of those things. Because you're not just going to have her learn one thing and then another, and then another, and then another. There's going to be a few things happening in tandem. So, and they're not going to be perfect. So, like, for example, one of them that I'm working on is ask, don't tell. And so an example would be like basically giving a rundown of what they're doing that day. So I'm like, tell me what you're doing today. Tell me your schedule. And so she would say, I'm doing this, and then 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 I'll talk to you later. And then after that, I will message you, right? And let's say she's going to be really busy at a certain point. Maybe she has like a meeting from 2 to 3 p.m., okay? At that point, there should be asking. So this is an example of the correction. Asking, not telling. Okay, maybe at the onset, may I tell you about my schedule today, sir? I'm going to be in a meeting from 2 to 3 p.m. May I contact you afterwards? Or is it okay if I put my service on pause during that time and resume when the meeting is over? May I contact you at the end of the day when I'm on my way home? So a lot of these things, it's always deferring to you and asking for permission, asking for direction, asking for guidance, asking for that flow pattern versus just telling. Oh shit. I just realized my cat is outside. Just hold on. Bear with me for 1 second. All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I forgot that I left my cat outside. All right. So, let's see here. Oh, yeah. So I was giving an example about correction. So it's the reasons you got to understand, like the reason why you're correcting, what it will do, and be cognizant of how they might feel and how they react, right? Is it just an immediate correction? And she says, yes, sir. Thank you for correcting me. Something that simple. Perfect. We don't need excuses. We don't need groveling. We don't need, oh, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. We don't need any of that emotional stuff. It has nothing to do with the structure itself, like how one feels and all that nonsense. Pardon me, guys. I'll be right with you. Okay. Pardon me. So that's the correction. All right. If there's repeated defiance, right? Repeated missteps in this thing. And so now it's like, okay, now I need to devise a way to punish. And this really, like I said, comes down to what makes them snap awake. All right. Is it a timeout? Right? Maybe they're very needy. Maybe they need your communication with them all the time. And you say, well, you're not going to have the permission of communicating with me for the next 3 hours. And to a person like that, it's going to be like hitting them in the stomach with a sledgehammer. Maybe they're very sensitive to pain, right? And this is something I've done. I said, take your socks off. And I had this little Ziploc bag full of small Lego pieces, not the big ones, just all the small ones, right? The 1x2s, the 2x2s, all the small shit. And I laid them out onto the floor. And I said, stand on those for 60 seconds. It's just 60 seconds. You would not believe how painful that is. Like, if you've got kids, you know how fucking painful it is to step on Legos. And so that's something. And then while the punishment is happening, you can talk to them and just say, hey, and recite what the problem was. Where did you fuck up? Have them recite where they fucked up. Have them recite what's the correct way things are supposed to go. So you're constantly like re-drilling the thing, recarving that channel in their brain. All right. And it's important to pay attention in either case with correction or punishment of what your tone is, your wording, your posture, all of these things. Like during a punishment that they have to do on their own, Like, are you going to stand or are you going to sit? They both lend a different, a different kind of thing. And what if you're sitting like across the room? You're not even close by. You're like 30 feet away, like that sends a different message than, like, say, standing in front of her with your arms folded, like, glaring. Like, everything it has to be fleshed out in your mind. Got to think about these things. So just keep that in mind. And keep in mind also the timing of things, your touch versus not touching. All of these things come into play. So just think about this stuff if you're in the position to be punishing and correcting. All right, so on the internal workings of the submissive, on her soul, a good submissive doesn't just want approval. She wants to be shaped. And punishment, when done with clarity and integrity, creates sharp lines around her devotion. But it's correction that fills in the sketch. That reinforces the daily obedience, the quiet rituals, the grace in every "yes, my lord," or "yes, sir." Okay? I'll say that again. Right? She wants to be shaped. Punishment, when done with clarity and integrity, is drawing the sharp lines. The correction is what colors in the sketch. It's what fills it in. So, things to watch out for. With correction, you don't want it to be nagging, and you don't want it to be overparenting. You don't want to come across as someone who's like a helicopter parent, constantly micromanaging, constantly correcting. Like, this to me says not that there's an issue with her, there's an issue with your leadership. There's an issue with your mindset. There's an issue with your program. If she's constantly falling off so easily. So it's not a problem. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look in, to investigate what's going on and what things you can do to correct yourself. Because maybe you've got bad habits in there that's creating the structure for which her behavior can easily fall off. The thing to watch out for with punishment is that you don't want the punishment to become abuse. You don't want it to be emotion driven, and you don't want it to be ego driven retaliation where you're upset that she's defying you and your ego's like, "Oh yeah, bitch, I'm going to show you who the fuck is in charge." Like, that's an ego driven retaliation. And enforcing a program with that, you will always lose. Because what's going to happen, because her nature being submissive, you're going to come in with this fiery sledgehammer and it's just going to smash her down. Okay? That's what happens when you have ego-driven retaliation. So you want to be able to self-check your motives as a dominant. Cat, what do you want, dude? Like, Cat just won't shut the fuck up. He probably caught a mouse outside and wants me to go look at it. Sorry, you're just going to have to hear him, I guess. So you want to be able to self-check your motivations. This is really important. You want to make sure you're not trying to get back. You want to make sure that you're not upset about the situation. This is really, really important. What do you got here? When I get yelled at and she walks away from me, I never chase because I'm staying right where I'm at. Okay. Are you the submissive in your relationship? One time I was at a New Year's Eve party and this woman pulled, I think you meant poured a drink on me, and I didn't get angry about it. I just walked away. Well, that's good. But why the hell did you get a drink poured on you? That had to have been something, because, drinks typically, if they're cocktails, are not very cheap. And she wasted a good drink on you. So be sure to self-check your motivation. Really, really important. And you got to check yourself. Like, you can't be checking someone else's behavior when you can't check yourself. So you have to make sure your motivation's on point. And also understand why some submissives crave punishment, but they truly grow through connection. Some will, because, okay, so how do I explain this? Some submissives have a fairly high level of lacking self-approval. They don't like themselves. And there's a lot of self-doubt. There could be even self-loathing. And if it's a very high degree, I would just say walk away. In my experience, there's always some in there. There's a certain amount of disapproval of the self, not good enough. And so when they receive punishment, it's almost like a hurt so good sort of thing. And you don't want to encourage. You don't want to encourage. You don't want to be an enabler of that self-rejection. So this is why it's important to understand pain points. It's important to understand what type of punishment gets the message across without triggering that self-loathing. Like, I deserve this, right? You don't want to spark that I deserve this goblin that lives inside her. It's just going to make things worse, right? Because as you're punishing her, she's like, that part of herself is going to be like, you piece of shit, you deserve this. And it's going to feel good in like a weird way, like almost like picking a scab or something like that. So this is something you have to be aware of. Correction, on the other hand, this is where growth really happens. And so you really got to learn how to do it right. Correction is super, super important. And it's, I would say, largely overlooked. I think dominants, they focus more on punishment than correction. And maybe it's because there are a lot of sadists that are dominants. Or let me just say, there's a lot of dominants who have sadism. And so I think that's why it happens, why you see the whole like punishment thing that's like really big in BDSM. But correction is actually much more potent. It goes deeper, and it affects, like I said, it goes wider. It affects the dynamic as a whole and calls into question her position in it, how she shows up. And that's why it can be a much more powerful tool than punishment. I think what's happening, and I read about this, as cats age, darkness kind of fucks with their perception, and they start meowing a lot when it goes into nighttime. That's what I read anyways. Man, I got some shit in my throat. What? All I was doing was dancing with her, and she put a drink on me, and she thought it was funny. Yeah, that's weird, man. I hope you stopped dancing at that point. And I don't know. I thought that only happened in the movies. I've never had a drink like thrown in my face or whatever. Does that happen, guys? All right, so let me continue. All right. So knowing which to choose. Correction asks, was this a mistake or a moment of misalignment? Punishment asks, was this willful? The dominant must see the heart beneath the behavior. If you punish what should have been corrected, you crush trust. If you correct what should have been punished, you create drift. The art lies in discernment. This is really, really important to understand. What punishment, you need to discern whether it was a willful action of defiance. Correction, you need to understand if was this a mistake or a moment of misalignment. You can't punish what should have been corrected, and you can't correct what should have been punished. You'll fuck up the whole thing. So, in learning how to do this properly, you see past the behavior. That's what you have to do. And this guy that I mentioned, this client of mine who's just like waking up to this stuff, he's now getting it. Like, yes, you recognize the behavior, like you're not like oblivious to it, but you see past it, you see through it to see what's really going on here. Not just to focus only on what has been done or said. Sure, that has to be dealt with, but what caused that to happen in the first place? What's driving this behavior? And that's what you need to address, because that's where she's veering off course. Which brings us to the third aspect here, which is realignment. What is realignment? Realignment is not correction, and it's certainly not punishment. It's a ceremony of reconnection. It is a dominant's response not to disobedience or disrespect, but to her drifting. It arises not when rules are broken, but when the rhythm is lost. Not when the submissive defies, but when she forgets why she kneels. All right, so check this out. The correction would be reminding her to kneel. The punishment would be to make her understand that she should have kneeled when she said no or purposely didn't. The realignment is there to remind her why she's kneeling in the first place. So realignment is the gentle summoning of the soul back to the center of service, the spirit of service. It is what you do when the body obeys, but the heart has grown quiet. When she is compliant, but not devoted. When her performance is perfect, but her presence has faded. So, what is realignment for? It's to rekindle reverence. It's to mend the unseen drift that occurs through routine, stress, distance, or neglect. To reroute the submissive in her own need to serve. And to restore polarity when her obedience no longer feels alive or your leadership no longer feels received. Realignment is not about behavior. It's about the essence. It's not reactive, it's restorative. So, how should this be administered? Realignment is a ritual. It's not a lecture. It should be quiet, symbolic, intentional. So, an example for the drifted submissive. She has been consistent in tasks, obedient in tone, but hollow. She does not smile when serving. She speaks the words, but without breath. You say nothing for days. You just observe. Then one evening after her tasks, you say, strip, kneel, don't speak. She kneels. You place her collar beside her, not on her, and you wait in silence for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. She begins to fidget, breathe heavier. The silence becomes unbearable. Finally, you speak. You've served, but you have not surrendered. Not truly. Not lately. I'm not punishing you. I'm retrieving you. Put the collar on very slowly. Right? And this is for you. You're not instructing her to put it on. You stand up, you grab the collar, and you very deliberately and slowly put it on her neck to draw attention to that symbol and what it means to her. And then you say, tell me what this means to you. Speak, not from memory, but from right now. And then she speaks. Often, she will cry. Her words will crack, and her devotion reawakens. So that's an example of a drifted submissive. Example number 2, post-emotional disconnection. So let's say after a disagreement or a personal crisis in her life, something has dulled the current between you. Rather than assigning more tasks or issuing more rules, you withdraw commands for a day. Let her feel the silence, not as punishment, but as vacuum, like the vacuum of space. Then bring her before you, a gentle voice. You haven't done anything wrong, but you've been far away. I'm not here to correct you. I'm here to bring you back. Tonight, you do not serve, you only return. And you lie her across your lap, no arousal, just a hand over her back, breathing in unison, no performance, just presence. And then you say the words, and then you tell her, say the words, I am yours, I remember. And you make her repeat this until it sounds real again. Third example, ritual rebinding. As part of maintenance, not because she's failed, but because the bond must be kept vivid. Set a date, say every full moon, for example. She's collared again, re-recites her vows, re-recites her mantras, her protocols. You touch her pulse points, speak affirmations into her ear. This is proactive realignment, like tuning an instrument that still plays well so that it continues to. So those are 3 examples of how realignment works. So I hope you understand the difference between realignment and then correction and punishment. Correction and punishment kind of live in a similar neighborhood. Realignment, although connected, it lives in a completely different neighborhood. So how can realignment be misused? Okay. Realignment is subtle. Because of that, it's really easy to misuse. So mistaking it for correction. If she breaks a rule and then you realign her instead, you may avoid needed structure, and she needs to feel consequence, not to be cradled. So you have to understand the difference then between breaking a rule, veering off course, defiance, and drifting. These are very different things. So you have to pay attention. You have to be sharp. Misuse. She disobeyed, but I had her kneel and reconnect. Right? That doesn't make sense. She disobeyed, but I had her kneel and reconnect. Like it doesn't fit. Correction or punishment was needed. So you dulled your edge in the name of softness. Or ignorance, thinking you're doing the right thing. Second mistake, mistaking it for therapy. Realignment is not emotional coaching. It's not coaxing her to feel better. That's not the point. Her feelings aren't really the issue here. It's about where her soul lies, where the spirit lies in terms of service. So a misuse example would be, she's overwhelmed with work and losing herself, so I just let her vent for an hour. That's support, but it's not realignment. Realignment must restore polarity, not just soothe the emotion. Another example is using it as performance. If you make realignment a performance, filmed, dramatized, romanticized, it loses that innate sacredness. It's turning it into a game, into an act, right? And we don't want that. So it would sound like we did a realignment scene and posted it online. Like, that takes away the genuineness of it, right? No, you choreographed a moment. The true ritual is private. It must be felt, not flaunted. And this is really important to understand. It's not for show. And then the fourth the fourth thing about messing up realignment is it should be rare. It's not something that needs to occur every month. Like, if it's reoccurring every month, you've got a problem. But that's the case for everything. If you're correcting too often, you have a problem. If you're punishing too often, you have a problem. If you're realigning too often, you have a problem. And it's stemming from you. It's absolutely stemming from you. There is a small chance that it's not. But like I said, you are the pivot point for the entire dynamic. You are that central hub by which the dynamic rotates around. So you need the first point of investigation. So you don't want to do this often. If you need to realign her every week or every month, the bonds may be poorly rooted. Excuse me. So if you say like, oh, we realign every few days just to stay close, that's not realignment. That's codependency in costume. So to recap here, correction nurtures growth, punishment enforces structure, and realignment reminds them where they belong. This is really important. So, what kind of dominant do you want to be? This is really important for you to understand, to know how you want to show up. And it's a deeper question. It's not something you can really answer quickly, because that's like saying, what kind of man do you want to be? But there's ways, there's tools. All right. So if that's something that you want to figure out, set up the consultation call with me. It's in the description of this video. So this all really, because you are that central hub, everything that you create, everything that you experience, everything that you have to correct or punish or realign, it has everything to do with you. Everything. So, in conclusion, what you witnessed tonight wasn't just a breakdown of terms. It's more like a mirror. Correction and punishment are not techniques, right? Realignment is not a technique. They are reflections of the man who delivers them. One builds, the other burns, one resets. But both, or all three, in the right hands, they sanctify the bond. So if you call yourself a dominant, understand this. Your authority is not proven in how hard you strike, but how precisely you decide when to strike and when not to. That discernment is what separates the amateur from the sovereign, the ruler from the reactive, the master from the boy. Do not ask her for a deeper surrender until you've mastered this line, because one day she will look up at you, broken, bare, or brilliant, and ask, was this for me or was this for you? And make sure you have the right answer. Until next time, lead with weight, rule with reason, and correct with purpose. I appreciate everyone coming through on the live. I appreciate you coming through on the replay. If anyone has any questions, please email me at justin@thedominanceacademy.com. Go to the website, thedominanceacademy.com, and set up a consultation. Let's get you rolling. Because if you're here now, I know this is part of your desires. It's not easy, but I can promise you it'll be one of the most rewarding things you ever learn in your life. All right, until next time, take it easy.